get this discussion started in a couple of minutes. We're just going to wait to let all the participants into the this seminar room. So if you can bear with us for 2 minutes or so, we're going to get started as soon as everybody's in the room. Thank you very much. Okay, I think few other people maybe keep signing on, but because we have a limited time, we're going to get started. Good morning for those of you who are channeling from the US, and good evening for those of you who are channeling in Japan and other parts of Asia. Welcome to the seminar series that Stimson is conducting with a collaboration with the Embassy of Japan that commemorates the 10th anniversary of Operation Tomodachi. This is the second of the three, or we very much hope to be a four seminar series. Today we have we're going to focus our discussion on what the Operation Tomodachi looked like when you were on the front line, being in the knee deep into the operation. We have two wonderful speakers who will share their experience with us this morning. From the U.S. side, we have Captain Jeffrey Moore, U.S. Navy. He's a pilot. He's an aviator, and he was in the very first group of the squadron that conducted a survey and a relief operation when even before the Operation Tomodachi had assumed its formal name. On the Japan side, we have a Major General Kazuo Tokito, retired from Japan Air Self-Defense Force, and he's currently a strategic advisor of Hitachi Limited, and also a visiting fellow at the Air Self-Defense Forces Command and Staff and Command College. He was actually a base commander of one of the Japan Air Self-Defense Force bases that were deeply impacted by the tsunami and the other disasters. So he would also share with us this experience. For logistical information, this is a simultaneously translated event. At the at the right of the icon, you will see the icon says interpretation. And if you hit that icon, you can choose either English or Japanese. If you would like to choose English, you would just hit the American flag icon. If you would prefer to hear everything in Japanese, you would hear you would click the Japanese flag icon. I'm going to present a couple of questions to both speakers, and then I'm going to open it up this session to invite others to join in to ask questions to the speakers. For those of you who would like to ask questions, please hit the Q&A icon, which is the left side on the bottom screen, and then I would acknowledge those questions as they come in. Please do not use chat function. I would not be able to look at those during the session is underway. I cannot open up just two different dialogues, so I'm only going to look at the Q&A box. So if you mistakenly type in your questions in a chat box, I would not be able to see them. So I would ask to kindly retyping them into the Q&A box. So without further ado, I would like to get started. Captain Moore, General Tokito, Thank you very much for joining me today. It's an honor to have you both. So let me quickly get started from the first question. So first, as I alluded to, and as you individually shared with me in our two separate conversation, you were very knee deep into this operation when the disaster from the moment literally the disaster hit Japan. So my first question to you is, what was it like to be there when this operation is start taking hold? And also, what are the major challenges that you found in the initial 48 to 72 hours after the disaster hit? Why don't I start from General Tokito first, and then I would ask Captain Moore to follow. Tokito-san, お願いします。
辰巳さん、どうもありがとうございます。今日はこういう形で参加をさせていただきまして、非常に名誉なことというふうに感じています。先ほどご紹介がありましたけれども、まず最初にですね、今年は大震災から10年ということもあります。先の震災で犠牲になられた方々に哀悼の意を表するとともにですね、当時救援のために駆けつけていただきました、友人である2万人を超える米国人、そして米国の政府、米国民の方々に心より感謝と敬意を表したいというふうに思います。私は先ほどご紹介にありましたように、2018年に8月に航空自衛隊を退官しましたけれども、2011年3月11日時点におきましては、仙台から約35キロ東北にあります航空自衛隊の松島基地に勤務をしておりまして、基地が大きな津波の被害を受けたときは、基地司令の下で航空戦力発揮の基盤となる基地の機能維持を任務とする基地業務軍司令として勤務をしておりました。その後、東京に一度戻りまして、震災から4年後に再び松島基地の基地司令として赴任をした経験を持っています。すなわち、震災直後から被災現場である松島基地で災害派遣や基地の復旧に携わり、その4年後に再度赴任した時には基地の復興の方に携わったことになります。本日は航空自衛隊の現場での経験として、未曾有の大震災で被災した松島基地での災害派遣の活動と、その後の基地の復興を通じて、双方の観点からお話ができるものと思います。まず最初の質問であります、震災直後に実行したものとして最も困難であったもの、これは非常にいい質問であり、まさに指揮官としてはですね、当然意識をしておかなければならないことだと思います。松島基地は海岸から約 1km離れたところにありまして、海抜も約2メートルということでしたので、この大震災で基地全体が津波に飲まれてしまいました。庁舎1階にありました私の執務室も出没をしまして、隊員とともに屋上に避難をし、難を逃れましたけれども、このいわゆる想定外という大震災、その後の津波、これについては経験したことのない事態でありまして、その直後はですね、何をすべきかというよりも、どうなっているのかの状況把握、これを停電になった闇夜の中で必死に洞察していたというのが、直後に一番困難だものだというふうに思います。それが想定外の怖さではあったと、今更ながら思い返しています。そしてこの困難なものは段階的に変わっていきます。その後、できる限りの情報収集をしつつ、夜が明けまして、基地内や基地周辺の被害状況が徐々に分かってくると、人命救助活動と並行して、松島基地の滑走路の一つを自力で復旧にすることに着手をしまして、その2日後に飛行場としての機能を復活させ、その翌日から運用を開始しました。基地司令の下で指揮官としては、基地の応急復旧、人命救助を主とした災害派遣活動に全力に発揮できるよう、現場指揮官としては部下に任せるところは任せる、そういうリーダーシップというものをですね、2番目に力を入れたところでございます。その後、全国の航空自衛隊からも応援部隊が続々と基地に集結してきてくれまして、基地内の復旧活動、応急復旧をしながら、増援部隊の受け入れをしつつ、人命救助を主体とした災害派遣、そして自衛隊として初めての統合任務部隊が編成をされまして、陸海自衛隊とともに災害派遣活動に従事しました。そんな時にですね、松島基地に米空軍の MC-130P が支援のために飛来してくれまして、この日は非常に天候が悪く、視界も悪かったんですけども、 無事着陸をしてくれまして、大変心強く感じたことを思い出します。このように刻々と変わる環境の中で、人命救助、そして基地の復旧、応急復旧を限られた環境で実施していくことが重要であり、混乱状態にならないように現場を取りまとめること、これが3番目に困難であったというふうに思っています。以上です。
Thank you very much, Tokito-san. It really is vivid the way you describe and how things are. Captain Moore, what about you? What about you? What did you see? What was going through your mind?
Well, thank you. First of all, Yuki, thanks for hosting this event. And it's an honor to have the invitation to appear alongside General Tokito in this important panel. And to echo his thoughts, I think these panels are incredibly important in an appropriate way to remember the legacy of those that lost their lives. And I also express our condolences as well, but also to learn from them. I was greatly enjoyed the webinar, the past webinars, especially the one with Vice Admiral Takashima and Vice Admiral Van Buskirk, as they talked about the strategic perspective. And hopefully today we can give the perspective of the tactical front lines in the recovery. And my goal today is really to represent all the United States military responders through the perspectives of our specific helicopter squadron, the HS-14 Chargers, and our sister squadron, HSL-51. At the time of the Great Eastern Japan earthquake, we were stationed at Naval Air Facility at Sugi on the Kanto Plain, just southwest of Tokyo. And so there, the earthquake, we felt it. It was immense, but it was more the magnitude and length of it. I think people said what we felt was more of equivalent of a 6 or 7 on the Richter scale, still significant. And so we didn't have the first-hand perspective relayed by General Tokito. Later that day, through a relationship between our base commander and leadership from their sister city, Shiroishi, up near Sendai, we got a request for food aid. And that really started our planning cycle and our understanding of the event. So while we started planning that event, simultaneously, leadership started getting the authorities to support and execute that mission. And I believe it went all the way up to the ambassador to get that United States support for providing aid. And so early on the morning of the 12th, we launched 2 helicopters packed full of food and aid after we had the authority to launch, and they headed up and delivered that aid. And it's notable for 2 points. First of all, to our knowledge, I think that was really one of the first official missions the United States was able to respond. But the second one was my wing aircraft had a personal camera and took a few pictures along the way. And note that these pictures are probably get you a failing grade in a basic photography class, but the pictures told a story, and they showed the immense flooding and destruction and billowing smoke coming from the coastal regions. And one of those pictures actually, I think, got released to media, went global, and we saw it in magazines. And that really gave us the perspective of the immensity of this event and what we were into. Being in the Navy, we had some experience, especially as helicopter, with major disasters. Obviously, we can talk about Hurricane Katrina, our own disaster, but as well as the 2004 earthquake and tsunami in the Indian Ocean, where we had Operation Unified Assistance. So right there, our experience, our history, we're into that mode of this is going to be a major operation and a major effort. On the Sunday, we started getting our first missions. We had a 4 helicopter ship mission up to the northeast of Honshu. And simultaneously, we started taking liaison officers around, getting them on board ships. And that's where we started getting an understanding of the evolving challenges that we would have. And that was that delivering some LNOs out to the ships at sea was our first encounter with the radiation plume. And so on that Sunday, we had to start setting up inspection stations, and we understood the challenges were a lot greater than we had known before. We had challenges with weather, terrain, distance from Atsugi. It was the winter, it was snow because of the Fukushima reactor. We had to go through central Honshu, through the mountains at high elevations, and in a helicopter, we had to go via visual flight rules. So very challenging missions to execute. We eventually got repositioned within the week up to Misawa to execute that. And that took away the tyranny of distance and terrain, though the weather remained a problem. The other issue, and I think probably maybe the biggest challenge, was the human element to all of this. Living in that Sugi, in the base, a lot of close relationships with the Japanese people. Many of our sailors had married Japanese spouses. And so right there at the very beginning, you know, we had immediately understood the issue. We had people that weren't in contact with family members. We had neighbors. And so we really understood this. And then simultaneously, the radiation plume. There's a human response element to things you don't know, can't see, can't understand. And this was brand new. And so working through those were, I think, our biggest challenges during that first week as we prepared and really got integrated into the response and recovery.
So one of the things that it often strikes me as highly unique about this situation for both self-defense force and U.S. military forces who are engaged in this operation is that you were also impacted at the personal level. Your family, or as Captain Moore said, you know, your in-law maybe, you know, in the impacted area. So on a family front, you know, you have people who, you know, you have your own family scrambling to find out what happened, what might have happened to the loved ones, and yet you have a mission to go away from the family and engage this operation. So I can only imagine the stress that was on, you know, all of you who were involved. So this is, I think, one of the things that really strikes me as highly unique as I keep hearing more and more stories about yours. I think I would like to start inviting the audience to start typing in questions if you have any. But in the meantime, let me move on to this next question. So you have you had the opportunity to sometimes work side by side, sometimes work together on this as with your respective counterparts or with respective forces that co-located with you throughout this period. And what were the couple of the things that you feel like you learned about each other as you go through this almost like shared parallel sometimes, but nonetheless shared experience? And then this time I would turn to Jeff first, and then Tokito-san.
All right, thank you. And I appreciate, first of all, the comment on the human element and the personal level. We had the opportunity to send an optional voluntary return to the United States for our family members. It really allowed us to focus. But I would say, while there was some leadership challenges to a person, man or woman, they understood that there were people in much more dire need, and just amazing opportunity to lead such great individuals that really put that feeling of service and sacrifice in front of them, knowing that there were people in more dire need. The relationship between the US military and the Japanese self-defense forces is absolutely amazing, the working environment. And so even before 3/11 Tomodachi, we had a great relationship, specifically us in the Navy with the Japanese maritime self-defense forces, establishing tight relationships, but really working complicated, hard, complex problems, tactical warfighting exercises. Just at the end of the last year in 2010, between end of November, early December, we had done a major exercise working together. And so when you have that foundational baseline for working together at all different levels, top leadership, but all the way down to the deck plate to solve complex problems. And that was the baseline. And so as we proceeded through Tomodachi, our experience in the Navy, we got to expand that to both the air defense and the land components of the self-defense forces as well. But I would even expand the question to working with civil authorities, working with the Japanese response is and capability. When we were working in Misawa, for the most part, our area of responsibility was Iwate Prefecture. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And, getting to coordinate with the civil response, many of us working the coastal areas where infrastructure had denied them access. And so we were providing aid and support to them and connecting those civil authorities with that. And we were over the 30, 45 days watching them come up from the north and south, rebuild that infrastructure as we move forward. Probably one of the biggest things that I would say is the work of the LNOs and coordinating the missions there and communicating what we were seeing on the ground to higher levels so they could put together new missions or new response or aid packages. I know we had one young lieutenant, James Bischoff, married to a Japanese spouse, fluent in Japanese. And I know he really wanted to be on the front lines delivering the aid. But we sent him up to Yokota, to U.S. Forces Japan, to be our LNO up there, and did amazing work. I heard stories of him sleeping maybe a couple hours during the first week there, but that interconnection, that working and putting together those missions, and that I think really solidified and intensified that great relationship that I think we're coming up on 70 years celebrating our alliance.
Great, thank you. Next, I'll turn to Tokito-san.
はい。今非常に素晴らしい、説明がありまして、実はここに至るまでですね、この震災が終わって10年目ということもあって、いわゆるネイビー・トゥ・ネイビーといいますか、海上自衛隊と米海軍がどういうオペレーションをしたかっていうのは、いろんなところに記録があるわけですけれども、非常に素晴らしいということを感じています。やはりこれはですね、日頃、先ほどありましたように、日頃の訓練がそのまんまオペレーションに生かされたっていうところは非常にありまして、他方で、航空自衛隊はですね、もう10年前の話なので、今はだいぶ変わっていると思いますけれども、当時はですね、なかなかそういう意味では、米軍との共同オペレーションっていうのは、末端まではなかなか浸透してなかったっていうのが現状だったと思います。特にオペレーションというところと違ってですね、基地の機能を強化するような、維持するような部署ではですね、なかなかそういうような共同オペレーションというのがなかったというところがあります。そういうこともあって、実はこの震災が起こって、先ほど紹介しましたように、米空軍の MC130P が来飛してくれた際にですね、20人ほどの非常にコンパクトな機能的な部隊が松島基地の方に第一陣として到着をしてくれました。その後、米軍のメンバーたちはですね、松島基地の方から仙台空港の方まで、送るという支援をしたわけですけれども、おそらくこれがですね、今回友達作戦として初めて共同という形で加わることができたことだというふうに思っています。で、その時にですね、非常に感じたこととしては、やはりオートバイとか、非常に警戒機敏なその装備品を持って非常に速いということで、非常に悪天候の中でも降りてくるということで、非常に実践的な部隊であるっていうことを感じたっていうのは非常に印象に残っています。で、ただそうは言いながらもですね、今、ジェフィリン大佐からありましたように、もっと密なオペレーションができるといいのではないかと当時は感じたところではありましたけれども、それはやはり今後の課題になるなというような認識を持っています。 その後なんですけども、この震災では米軍のですね、災害救助として、友達作戦というのが実行されまして、実は近くではですね、仙台空港と、それに加えまして、特にその町牧市の近傍に野比駅というその駅がありまして、これが壊滅的な被害を受けたわけですけれども、その時にですね、町牧市周辺のソウルトレイン作戦ということで、近傍で被害の大きかったこの駅の瓦礫処理をですね、米陸軍と航空自衛隊、陸上自衛隊の隊員で共同で行って、瓦礫を取り除いたと。この米軍の貢献というのは、今でも駅の跡地にその震災の記念施設があるんですけれども、そこでは大きく紹介をされていまして、地元の住民の記憶に感謝とともに残っています。私自身も非常に誇りに思っている作戦の一つです。で、先ほどですね、ジェフリー大佐からもありましたけど、最初に困ったことってやっぱりコミュニケーションだってことをおっしゃったわけですね。これは質問の方にもちょっと出ていましたけども、コミュニケーションで実は非常に難しかったです。で、当時は今と違いまして、ほとんどが電話の世界ですね。で、実は当時に初めて言われたのが SNS が非常に流行ったということでありましたけども、実は私もですね、実はえっと、専門は通信なんですけれども、SNS をあんまり使ったことがなかったので、なかなかうまく使えなかったということで、それ以降ですね、SNS をガンガン使うようになったわけですけれども、まさにそういうようにですね、電話一つにこだわっていると、なかなか通信が取れないなっていうのが当時の教訓です。実際どうやってやったかというと、実はそこは民間の通信の中で、その一つですね、NTT の方から衛星電話を借りてきたりとか、あるいはもちろん防衛省が持っているですね、衛星の通信施設とか、一番最初に来てくれたのがその移動通信部隊だったわけですけれども、そういう部隊を通じて、オペレーションの方をやったんですが、先ほども問題になったように、まさに家族との連絡とかですね、その辺のところが非常に難しかったのは事実です。で、あともう一つはですね、情報共有するためにそのコミュニケーションが大事というふうに言われますけれども、いろんなと、特に統合運用をやりますと、いろんなところとやはり情報共有した方がいいって言われるんですが、誰と情報共有するかっていうのがとっても大事です。現場同士で情報共有をしても、実は権限と責任に合ったところのレベルでしっかり情報共有するというのが大事で、実際にその場所で権限をしても全然その権限もないところと同士がいくら情報を共有しても混乱を招くだけなんですね。したがってその混乱を招かないところでいいタイミングでの情報共有が必要ではないかというふうに感じています。そういったこともありまして、この時、米軍から学んだ教訓としてはですね、やっぱり米軍というのは素早い動きが早いということと、それから機能的な部隊運用をするということ、そしてですね、今回やっぱり感じましたのは、その背後にはですね、友達作戦とかソウルトレインという名前にもあるようにですね、やっぱり我が国に対する援助の気持ちが溢れているということは非常に感じました。で、それが我々を含めてですね、被災した地域の人たちを勇気づけてくれたことっていうのは、決して忘れることではないというふうに思っています。以上です。
Thank you, Tokito-san. So, as I expected, questions have started to come in. So I'm going to go right through them. So first question actually come from the speaker of our first seminar, Vasam Ravambaskark. And this one is for you, Tokito-san. Good morning, Scott, by the way. Thank you for channeling in. For General Tokito, could you please discuss how you communicated to your team and to the Joint Command element, given all the disruption to the infrastructure of your base? You alluded to already partly about the mobile communication group that came and support you, but if you can elaborate a little bit more on how those communications took place, greatly appreciate it.
今大体お話ししたような内容で、やはり基本的には我々が持っているその移動通信の機材というのをベースにコミュニケーションしています。で、それで基本的にも市ヶ谷の方にその直でつながるというふうなラインもありましたし、近傍にですね、防衛省専用のその通信路もありましたので、そういったものを使って通信を取りました。で、民間の通信というのも当然使えるわけですけれども、やはりここで考えなくてはいけないのは、やはりそのセキュリティの問題がありますね。いろんなところでやることによって、実はこれがいくらそのミッションがですね、ミリタリーのミッションではないとはいえ、セキュリティを必要に考えておきませんと、いろんなところで情報共有が無秩序に行われるのも良くないということもありますので、そういったことも踏まえて、基本はですね、 艦といいますか、自衛隊が持っている通信を中心に使いました。しかし、ご案内の通り、衛星というのは非常に容量が限られていますので、その時に、当時ですね、仙台にJTF のジョイントタスクフォースのですね、統制所がありましたので、そこを中心に調整をしてもらいまして、まさに被災現場を優先してやってもらったというところがございます。もちろんご案内の通り、10万人体制でいろんな部隊が展開していましたので、そのいろんな部隊に対してうまくそこがですね、コントロールしていたというのが実態です。
Thank you, Tokito-san. So next question is to both of you from John Robinson. If you have any, have you had any experience during your operation interacting with the local and international NGO that focuses on humanitarian and disaster relief organization? And if you have, what were those experiences like? Did the communication go smoothly? Were they able to complement what you were trying to accomplish? If you can share any of those experiences, if you have any, that was a question. So I would maybe, I'll turn to Jeff first this time.
Thank you, Yuki. First of all, echo General's comments on making sure you communicate to the right people who have the authority and the capability. But I think what we were able to do at the ground level is make those connections to those civilian authorities, those NGOs. I think, from our experience in multiple disasters, the ability to come together and work together for a common cause and goal was incredibly important. And I'll share just a couple of stories relaying how we did that. Early on, we were told we had to take one of our photographer mates to take pictures of the media. And I don't think there's any first responder out there that really wants their picture, or so they just want to do the work, they want to respond. And we get to the first, I think it was a school, and we're having a communication issue with the group leader of that area. And for most people were congregating in gyms, schools, community centers on high ground. And so we were relaying to get the chain to set up to unload the food off of the helicopter and in, and there was a little bit of a communication. And that photographer's mate was fluent in Japanese. And a second-class petty officer walked out and started coordinating and cooperating and translating, and all of a sudden things went extremely smoothly. And so that was greatly important. And from then on, we took that photographer's mate and we made sure that we had someone who spoke Japanese in every helicopter going forth to work with those local leaders that had set themselves up in impromptu capacities at there. The second piece is we could see inland where the civil authorities were formulating aid areas and stations. And so we would pass our information, our updates, and our perspectives on what certain communities or schools needed for future aid up our chain of command, working through the Reagan Carrier Strike Group. We had ET2s overhead that would take our messages, but we would also relay that information. We would go land and relay that information to them on the ground to make sure that information was known, that was transparent in order to meet the needs and demands of the people that were isolated and in need as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Tokito-san, お願いします。
いろんなところとの情報共有というのはですね、まさに現場レベルっていうのはなかなか難しかったように思います。それはもちろんですね、震災が起こった当初の時は、それはもう人命救助というものを中心に考えて、それをやるんですけども、ある程度落ち着いてきたところについてはですね、自衛隊における災害派遣ができるところと、まさに民間のようなところができるところ、ボランティアができるところっていうのをある程度、区分けをしていかなきゃいけないというのもあります。そういったこともあって、おそらく当時はですね、基本的には自治体との関係っていうのは非常に強く認識していましたので、いわゆる連絡官っていうのを自治体に派遣をして、で、あとは実際に現場に派遣した隊員たちからですね、その時の情報を聞きながら、 で、あくまでも現場と言いつつも、当時は JTF で動いてましたので、JTF の司令部とよく情報を共有してというような形になってたと思います。で、自衛隊もですね、なかなか災害派遣ということになりますと、いわゆる災害派遣の3要素というのがありますので、これをうまく解釈をしながら、できるところ、できないことがございますので、そこもしっかりと気をつけながらですね、しかしながら、その災害派遣の3要素があるからやらないのではなくて、どういうふうにしてやればできるのかというようなことも考えながらやってたように思います。以上です。
Thank you both. So the next question is coming from it actually to kind of extrapolate your thought into a little bit more broad, applying it to a more broader Asia Pacific region. Next question comes from HJU, who asks, how did the experience in Operation Tomodachi influence or impact how the U.S.-Japan collaborates in other natural disasters in the Asia Pacific region? I mean, as we all know, two militaries have a long history of working on this type of operations, even outside Japan. This really was the first time that it happened in Japan. But how did the experience in Operation Tomodachi further helped deepen the bilateral collaboration when the two services go out and do these things outside of Japan in a broader Indo-Pacific region? I will turn to General Tokito this time, and then followed by Jeff. Tokito-san.
はい、インド太平洋地域ということで、急にこういう広がったような感じがしますけれども、やはりですね、今回、教訓の一つとして、先ほど申し上げたように、日米の間の平素からの連携要領っていうのが非常に重要であると思っています。で、先ほどジフリンさんのですね、ジフリンキャプテンのことの中から言うと、本当にネイビートゥネイビーで、普段からほとんどその遜色なくできるようになっていたということをおっしゃっていましたので、まさにそういう関係というのを構築する必要があるというふうに感じていました。ただですね、震災が終わった後に、実は航空自衛隊も横田基地に総隊司令部をはじめ、主要な部隊も動いていますので、今は非常に日米間で情報がスムーズに流れているというふうに聞いています。そういうこともあって、そういうまず関係をしっかりと構築するっていうのが必要なんではないかと。で今回、いろんなところでですね、震災の後に言われていることというのは、やはりこの友達作戦を通じて、日米同盟が本当に強固なものであったということだけではなくて、やはり人間関係と信頼関係というのが非常に重要であるということを言われていますので、それと同じようにですね、普段から信頼関係であり、お互いの人であり、文化であり、そういったことを尊重するような活動を続けていればですね、いろんなところでも協力できる、共同できるということについての土台ができるのではないかというふうに思っています。
Thank you, Tokito-san. Jeff?
Thank you. I think that's a really important question as we talk about collaborating and building coalitions for especially that important mission, humanitarian relief and disaster response. I can't speak too specifically. I only did another year in Japan and came back to the United States in 2012. But there will most likely be future disasters, and it will require an international response. It will require coalitions to bring the aid necessary across. And so echoing what General Tokito said, we built collaboration, communication, and skill sets that we can apply to situation. Us at the tactical level can give the strategic leaders, our civilian leaders, the options to respond and know that we are an effective team, that we can build on Operation Tomodachi lessons learned and apply them wherever the disaster is.
Thank you. And I think one of the highly unique characteristics about this operation and operational condition was that on the one hand, you have an ongoing recovery and rescue mission from the earthquake and the physical destruction. But then on the other hand, like Jeff alluded to in his opening remarks, you also had to fight with something that you can't see, you can't smell, which is radiation. And I actually do have a couple of questions coming in focusing on that element. So I'll just group them together. So question this question. First question is on this from Ms. Hamamoto. To the extent possible, if you can both elaborate on how U.S. and Japan divide and conquer or collaborated in containing the Fukushima nuclear plant's associated accidents. And complemented by that is actually a question from Lieutenant General Owe, who was at the Joint Staff at that time. How did this the complexity of the disaster that involves radiation impacted and posed challenge on your operational conditions and when you actually execute your missions? I would this time start from Jeff, and I would ask Tokito-san to follow.
Thank you. Both of those great questions. Our responsibility was really relief in the northeast corner of Honshu. So I don't think I'm really qualified to talk about the response to the funeral. I know we brought logistics, helicopters, we brought a lot of capabilities up to the Fukushima area. But I think other people are better situated to answer that. But if I could, I think focus on that second question is how we dealt with the radiation impacts. And there were several that we had to look at. We've already talked about the personal issues. And one of the things that we did, we were given a team from our submarine brethren that at the tactical level, they were to help us with maintenance procedures, handling of parts that we need to replace on the helicopter to make sure that they were safely packaged and taken care of. And I allowed those people with an expertise in radiological effects to talk and intersperse with our people all the way down the deck plate to reassure them that this threat of radiation, that the leadership, and we had great leadership. I think our strike group commander, our Navy Forces commander, Admiral Wren, and obviously Admiral Van Buskirk, all nuclear engineers, nuclear trained, and provided us great guidance and context. So that was probably the first thing. The second thing is a medical perspective. So we had doctors, we were taking potassium iodide pills, and proud to say that when we did our operational health screenings at the end of the response, no one was contaminated, and that was great news and part of that response. So the incorporation of the expertise, but the biggest thing was trying to figure out how to handle the maintenance on the aircraft so we could get them back in the next day to respond. And if the aircraft got too contaminated, we would potentially have to take them offline for several days to respond, and that's helicopters that couldn't provide relief. So there were some tough decisions as we were responding, to provide aid versus the ability to provide aid tomorrow. And really, we had to empower our junior lieutenants, our aircraft commanders to make those decisions. We were getting guidance daily on where the plumes were, where we could fly, where we couldn't fly, and that was updated through our communications link with our E2. And tremendously complex problem. And just one of the things that we were working through with the flooding, with the terrain, with the weather. I wouldn't rank one challenge over another, but just we had to make sure that we were doing our risk assessments and mitigations for all those with every daily flight.
Thank you, Jeff. Tokito-san.
はい。松島基地の方からはですね、直接的にこの福島の方へのミッションというのはなかったわけですけれども、やはり当時、航空自衛隊としてはですね、冷却のためにその放水という観点で消防車というものをですね、支援したというところがございました。またこの影響についてどのようにその災害派遣の活動と組み合わせたかというふうに言いますと、当時はですね、気象台というのもありますので、その天候を見ながらですね、その時の風向きというのをずっと見ておりまして、で作業をするときに風向き、まさにその福島のところからの風が来る あるいはその時に雨が降るといった時には作業をですね、どのようにするかということはよく現場と調整をしていたりとか、あとはその外貨カウンター等で放射線の濃度はですね、常にほぼ毎日測定をして、災害発見そのものに影響があるかないかという観点で見ていたということであります。以上です。
Thank you. And then I actually have one question to each of you specifically. So I think let me pose this one to Tokito-san first. Tokito-san, you mentioned in one of the responses to the question, you referred to three conditions or three elements of self-defense forces operations, disaster relief operations. 災害における自衛隊の3要素 to be specific. Ms. Mari Morimoto, she's asking you to elaborate what do you mean by that? So that is the question to you, Tokito-san. And to Jeff, we have a question from Tony Fox. You described about direct contact with the local authorities in Japan. Did you happen to, during your operations, did you interact much with USAID personnel that was also, who were also in the country at that time? So I would start from Tokito-san, and then I'll ask Jeff to do the answer directly to this. Tokito-san, you're muted.
すいません。自衛隊がですね、災害派遣という形で行動できるときはですね、一つは公共性ということですね。公共性、まさにその個人的なものにやるんではなくて、公共性が非常にあるということ。それからあとはですね、非代替性ということで、自衛隊でしかできないということですね。それが非常に必要なことになっています。で、もう一つはですね、ちょっとお待ちください。ですね、もう一つについては、緊急性ということですね。非常に押し迫った形での時に、緊急な時に自衛隊ができると。で、そういうふうにしませんと、いわゆる民間の能力がそこに入れれるのに、自衛隊がそこに入ってしまうと、民政圧迫になってしまったりとか、あるいは特定のものになってしまったりとかっていう、そういう原則がございます。で、原則の中でしっかりそれを適用する形で、いわゆる国民の方々にも理解をした活動というのをやらなきゃいけません。ただこれは今回のようにですね、非常にその現場として切羽の緊急事態というふうな形になってますけども、それでもやるんですけども、しっかりそこも考えながらですね、災害派遣という活動をしたということでございます。最初すみませんの。
Thank you. That's all right. Jeff, to the question directly posed to you about your possible potential interaction with the USAID personnel.
Yes, thank you. We have some great capabilities in the United States that are really on the ability, global alert to go anywhere that we can. And so those search and rescue teams specifically were from, I believe, Fairfax, Virginia, and LA, Los Angeles. And so just incredible capabilities. They were up there. I think we ran into them. We crossed a couple of days when we finally got to Misawa for operations. And saw them and got to interact a lot in the chow lines to hear their stories and their experiences. But we never got to really work and interoperate, but just really proud of that United States capability that we can offer and quick response. I think they were on the plane within 24 hours or so and in there working, I think, all the way down the coastline from Hachinohe City, and I think maybe all the way down to Sendai. So great capability.
Thank you both. Actually, I have a question from Kevin Mayer, who was actually on the state side in the planning response cell at the State Department at the time of Operation Tomodachi. Morning, Kevin. Thank you for your question. Based upon your experience, what is the key lessons learned that you would like to share with your younger officers who would inevitably will have opportunities to participate or engage in this large-scale disaster relief like this? I'll start with you, Jeff, and then ask Tokito-san to follow.
That's a great question, and I think that's what I really appreciate about this forum is an opportunity to learn and educate and train our future personnel. I would probably say the biggest leadership recommendation is to enable your team. The complexity of this disaster was so huge. There's no way you could micromanage it from the top. And so our leadership put trust in me and my fellow commanders to execute a mission. I mean, literally, they gave us a responsibility in the area to deliver aid. They gave us the resources and the capability. And they gave us some constraints and restraints and made sure we understood the authorities that we had. But other than that, we were able to execute. And then I was able to pass that down to our very young lieutenants in the aircraft, making those tough decisions that we talked about earlier. And that, I think, is, if I could key on one thing, you have to do that. Simultaneously, in our maintenance, our troops behind the scenes that stood up leadership cells, cleaning aircraft in freezing rain, nighttime, horrible conditions, but taking leadership responsibility there. We enabled them and the chief's mess to really respond, and that was great. Making decisions, understanding the processes and procedures. And we were learning a lot, especially with the radiological response. And that's what I'm most proud of our team and their response, and stepping up and taking those responsibilities. And so that would be my guidance to future leaders, is you really have to enable your whole team, empower them, and for them to communicate the issues that they are having, so we can collectively address them as a team. As I said, we're all learning, and we can't stifle their issues or what they're seeing at the deck plate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. It's very interesting. In our first seminar, as you may recall, the last question to both of our speakers was the what is the most important thing that you think about leadership? And I think that Scott said almost exactly the same thing about delegate, trust your people, trust your people's judgment who works for you. So it is amazing that I was like, okay. So this is this seems to be the credo, like sort of running through the U.S. Navy. With that, Tokito-san.
今、ジェフ大佐非常にいいこと言われたと思うんですけど、チームというのはですね、私は非常に重要だと思っています。私が2回目に松島に勤務した時も、私の勤務目標はチームは松島でしたので、そのチームというのは非常に大事です。で、このチームというのは、本当に先ほど私が冒頭に言ったようにですね、部下に仕事を任せる、権限を任せるということだけではなくて、航空自衛隊はですね、実は今回松島基地だけではなくて、それ以外の部隊、あるいは空爆であるとか、あるいは上級司令部とか、差し出しをしてくれる先の部隊がものすごく気を使って、ものすごく現場のことを考えて出してくれたわけですね。したがって今回の東日本のオペレーションはですね、現場の部隊だけではなくて、実はその裏には広報も含めて、いろんな部隊の思いが一緒に集まったという大きなチームだっていうふうに思っています。そういったこともあって、実はその現場にいたらどうするかということだけではなくて、現場にいなくてもそこに加わっているっていう認識を持てばですね、非常に大きな力が出せるっていうのが大きな教訓でもあり、これはぜひですね、そういうことを継承していただきたいし、それはですね、私のような立場の人間もそういったところはしっかりと応援したいというふうに思っています。
Thank you both. This 9 o'clock hour is fast approaching, so I think this will be the last question. I'm going to combine the last two questions that are up there. So this is specifically for Tokito-san. Question is that does this how the experience or the exposure, I guess, very positive coverage that the Self-Defense Force had throughout this disaster relief and reconstruction efforts, do you think that helped the recruiting of the Self-Defense Force in the future for since then afterwards? To the extent that if you can share that'll be great. And finally, to both gentlemen, how civilians who interface with you during this time of during this operation, what was it like? Were they obviously they were very upset or emotionally distraught from this destruction itself, but then what is their response when they first see you with your relief packet, or they see you working to reconstruct the road? What was your interaction was like? And in your sense, as you conduct your missions, what was the bigger challenge, the physical destruction in the aftermath of earthquake and tsunami, or what seems to be the consistent in discussion, which is what you cannot see, you can feel, radiation challenge? So I would start from Tokito-san, and then ask Jeff to finish it up for us, for all of us.
なかなか確信のついた質問ありがとうございます。文民との関係ということ、それからどういう影響が役に立ったかということをですね、言わせていただくと、実は地元の住民の方からのその環境がですね、見えるように変わってきたというふうに思います。それは2回目に松島基地に、赴任したときにですね、これまでの方々と全く違う反応だったですね。それはなぜかというと、いわゆるですね、自衛隊としてそこに存在意義が非常に出てきたと。オペレーション友達と同じように、この人たちは何かあったら我々を守ってくれるっていうのがですね、やはり言葉ではなくて実際に伝わったんではないかというふうに思っています。で、その一つの表れがですね、実は私が2回目に赴任したときに、基地の復興するときに F2 という戦闘機がですね、しばらく4年ぐらい、三沢で、訓練をやってたんですけども、それが戻ってくるというセレモニーをやったんですが、戻ってきたときって、大体その基地は騒音の問題があるわけです。で、これまで非常に静かだったところに騒音が入ってくるので、非常に基地の周辺の対策を気にしてたわけですけれども、実は地元の方々からは思いがけない言葉が返ってきまして、実は懐かしい音が聞けて嬉しいということが返ってきたわけですね。まさにその普通の生活に戻れるということを自衛隊が帰ってきてくれたということで非常に嬉しかったということで、実はですね、戻ってきて最初の1ヶ月っていうのは騒音苦情っていうのがゼロだったんです。それぐらいですね、受け入れられたというふうに思います。したがって私の方からはですね、何が役に立ったかということについては、まさにプライドを持って我々の仕事をすべきでないかということですね。プライドを持って仕事をしていれば、いつか必ず理解してもらえるということ、そして航空自衛隊としての仕事というのが、まさに誇りを持ってやるべきことだということをですね、申し上げたいというふうに思います。以上です。
Thank you. Jeff? Last words.
Thank you. First of all, with the flooding versus the radiation, I think the flooding was definitely the biggest impact, the significant damage. I think we learned all about the radiation threat. The containment efforts were tremendous, true heroes, but it was really the flooding on that. But the civilian interface question, I think that's incredibly important. As we showed up to some of these isolated places, we were really kind of the first contact, and that was a great opportunity and just completely welcoming, completely appreciative. We flew with a corpsman in every one of our aircraft so we could do a medical needs assessment and evacuate them if need be. We provided need, and probably the hardest thing is, we didn't always have all the supplies that were needed, whether there was food, clothing, medical supplies. And so we always made sure that we came back. But that interface with the civilians is a memorable one. And as I look and translate that experience to today with the COVID pandemic, I often refer to experiences of 9/11 in our country and 3/11, this earthquake, tsunami, and ensuing disaster. And I talk about the resilience and the response of 3/11 and the people everywhere. I had the opportunity, New Year's 2015, with Admiral Van Buskirk to go to Pasadena to the Rose Bowl and participate in a Operation Tomodachi event. And it was great. There was a group of young students from Miyagi prefecture that were there with pictures of post-disaster and the reconstruction. And those were just incredible stories. But my biggest takeaway was just watching these young adults, these students, be kids again, 3.5 years later, finding that recovery, being a symbol of the human spirit, to the ability to be resilient and recover. They were great representatives of Japan. And I think that is what we encountered then. That's what we see today. And I think that's the importance of the seminar, messages of hope that we can bring and apply to today. And so honored to be invited to participate in today's discussion. As I said at the beginning, it's a great way to remember all those who lost their lives and to really celebrate and capture the heroic efforts in that response, strengthen our alliance between the United States and Japan. And I am grateful that we were able to contribute just a small part to that recovery. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, honor as ours certainly to host both of you this morning and this evening for Tokito-san. It is now 9 o'clock in the Eastern Standard Time, 11 o'clock p.m. in Tokyo time. So I think we need to make sure that Tokito-san gets a good night's sleep. With that, this concludes the second of this Operation Tomodachi Remember seminar series. Again, I would like to thank both of the speakers, Captain Moore, General Tokito. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thanks for all of you who are channeling in the, for some, it's a Friday morning or Friday night, not a greatest time to have these seminars, but I'm really, really encouraged about this level of attendance and the types of good questions that I've been receiving throughout these first two seminars. So we would keep you all posted on the next seminar. And we would hope to see many of you, all of you, hopefully, back to the third seminar of this seminar series. So thank you again. And this concludes the today's session. Thank you.